to both.
Oh, really?
They did senior night kind of for their first home game. They wouldn't miss senior night. And then between the girls' game and the boys' game, they completely emptied the gym and cleaned it down. Now, while they were cleaning it down, the boys' team was warming up, so you didn't get to watch the warm-ups, but but that way they were ready to start the game when they.
Wow. So you could go in and attend them both, but you had to leave between them. And
No, you either got a ticket for the girls' game or you got a ticket for the boys' game. I suppose if you were a parent of both, you probably could get in.
Oh, okay. They give preference to the parents first, and yeah, I can.
3 tickets to a person, maximum.
Yeah, I was wondering how they were gonna they were gonna handle that, and I know for the football season that NFHS network that does that they stream all the games and stuff, and I'd sit at home and I'd have Campbell County and Thunder Basin both up on my screen on each side, and I'm taking notes on both, and so I'm not actually covering them. He's covering them, but I'm putting out Facebook posts and tweets as they score and stuff.
Yeah. Now Wyoming's doing a lot of its home games on video. There's a video link through the university for that. I watched that to see the color guy, because the color man is my son.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that for basketball.
Yeah, basketball home games. He's
for both men and women, or
no, just the men.
Just the men.
Yeah.
Wow, I did not know that.
First game, they had a little trouble, whether he was supposed to be doing color or the other guy was supposed to be announcing the game. But they did better on the second game. By the third game, they had teamwork. They were just.
Yeah, well, I bet not having any of the scrimmages or anything like that, nothing really to get your footing going on first.
Yeah.
So, first off, I assume each year you've seen we put out the 10 who made a difference.
Oh yeah. And pleased that you did that. I think that's a real.
And we really try to pick people who, not so much that it's their job, but because they're, they do more than that. And they really go out and pretty much at any time. You probably could have been one of them, but.
No, that's why it was a total surprise to me, because I thought it should really be the people that are here doing the stuff every day.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think people would argue that you do stuff every day for people around here too. You just can't see it because you're a couple thousand miles away. Yeah. But what did you think when you heard that you were?
One of my biggest surprises with being a senator was the casework. I went to legislate, and then I found out that probably our most important work is casework, where people are having a problem with the federal government, an individual problem with the federal government, and often it can be solved because there's not a lot of common sense in government, but you can bring them to some common sense and or find some records. One of the biggest problems are people that during Vietnam and after Vietnam, the guys weren't very interested in their medals. But now their next generation or 2 generations later are really interested in their medals. So when they try to do the research to get the medals, they said, oh, no, those burned up in a fire in St. Louis. That's not what happened. The government never does anything with just one record anyway. So that was a good excuse, because everything now can be looked up digitally, but not from the Vietnam War. For that one, they have to go back and dig through old dusty boxes and find the records.
And you've helped them do that.
We made sure that they went back and looked through old dusty boxes.
Sure. Have you been surprised what you're saying about casework? It sounds like a little more. And sometimes it is advocacy for people who are. Did you find people on an individual basis might be surprised that a senator would take interest in their problem?
Our biggest surprise was how long they waited and got frustrated before they ever found out about us, even though we talked about it, every place we went. If you're having a problem with the federal government, get a hold of us. Got experts that work on it.
Sure.
And I think we handled. I think when I ran last time, the count was 13,000 cases that we'd handled. So
wow.
I'm sure it's over 15,000 now.
Wow.
For individuals. Some of them are really fascinating.
Oh, totally.
I
mean, yeah, that's half the population of Gillette, almost.
Yeah.
Speaking
of that was statewide.
Oh yeah. Obviously, you
just,
represent everyone in Wyoming, not just.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, as far as a group.
Yeah. As far as relationship, that's right.
That you said, and you said in your farewell, and we've heard it before too, about how you never really when you first got into it had a plan, that you thought, boy, I want to get into politics.
Right.
Now looking back on it, what do you think you would have done had you not gotten into politics?
Well, Diane and I had already planned that at some point we would close out. In fact, we did close out the shoe store before I ever ran. And then we were going to see if we could teach in community colleges across the United States so that we could have a big city experience. And we'd just do, a different school every year. That way we wouldn't be stepping on anybody's tenure. And we thought we could probably get jobs. She had a master's and I had a master's degree. And both of us had some experience. And so we thought we could do that and get to see some other towns. We have now seen the city.
I was going to say, I think you've had a big city experience.
We've seen a lot of cities in the United States and overseas. And so we're ready to come back to the really delightful place, which is right here.
And through it all, you've always, you've never, you've always stuck up for Wyoming, but always for Gillette too, and say, Gillette's my town, and that's. And I noticed you came back here first from Wyoming. What is it about Gillette that?
Well, Diane and I got married, and the next week we moved here, and what we were intending to do was start a life, and we started a shoe store, and then we got to.
So you found your soul.
Then we got to build a community. And then I got to do some things at the state level and at the federal level, but it all started here and is based on what I learned while I was here.
And you were here for a real important. How would you compare this time for the Powder River Basin and Gillette as compared to when you were mayor? Both very important times, but in different ways.
Oh, much different. At the time that I was mayor, I was having to sell people on preparing for growth and welcoming growth. And now we're on a possible downturn, although we're more fearful of it than what's really happening. And with some ingenuity, there are a lot of things that can be done with what we have here that'll keep it going. But it's going to take a lot of ingenuity, a lot of planning. One of the first things I did when I got elected mayor was I started a future directions committee to try and figure out what we were going to have to solve with the community. We saw this growth possibly coming, no idea how much it was going to be. And that committee did a fantastic job. And today Gillette still has a future directions committee. It's just not formal. This is the only town that I've been in anywhere that really dreams ahead, visions ahead, figures out what we're missing. And then they get it. And they get it faster than any place I've ever seen. And I hope that doesn't change. I've been asked why that happens, because other towns want to know what caused that. I said, well, the real advantage that we had is we were a boom town. And older people don't come to a boom town, just young people. And that's what happened to Gillette. I was a young person at the time. I was 29 when I was elected mayor. And the advantage of young people is they don't know what can't be done. You know, they can't say, oh, we tried that 20 years ago and it didn't work, so we're not going to do it. They come up with a good idea, they get some encouragement, they just go ahead and do it.
Mm-hmm.
One of my first shocks as mayor was having a group of people come to see me, and they said, you know, and this is before the federal government figured it out, you know, it's wrong to have kids incarcerated with adults. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna buy a house, and we're gonna get some house parents, and they're gonna kind of incarcerate the kids, but they're gonna make sure that they're taken care of and that they show up for their court appointments and things. And we're gonna call it the S House. I said, oh, that sounds really good. I think that's really innovative. What do you expect the city to do? They were shocked. They said, we didn't expect the city to do anything. We just thought you ought to know. 2 weeks later, they had already purchased the house. We're in the process of getting the house parents, and it's grown into a massive thing that takes care of Northeast Wyoming now.
So sometimes, it seems like you're saying sometimes government shouldn't stand in the way of what people want to do.
Yeah, people have good ideas. And one of the tragedies that I see is more and more we're expecting government to do it. Probably because we're listening to older people. Young kids know what needs to be done, and if they just went and did it, they could do it. You're from, as long as you can get over it. Because people are always showing up and saying, hey, how come you don't have this? Where I came from, they had this. And I didn't mind them saying that we ought to have something. I had 2 psychiatrists come to see me in my office, and they said, you don't have any racquetball courts. I said, what's a racquetball court? So they kind of explained it, and they said, well, you could start with some outdoor ones. I said, oh, good, okay. So we got in my car and we went over to some city property over here where the rec center later was built. And said, now, you know, if you were building these things, what direction would you put them for the sun? Is that important? And they kind of laid out how it ought to be and what it, and I said, okay, go ahead and do it. They said, what? I said, oh yeah, the city doesn't have any money to do anything like that, but this ground is here and you're welcome to it if you want to go ahead and build them. And they built the racquetball courts, they built a following for racquetball, and when the rec center was built, there were racquetball courts. And there still are racquetball courts at the new rec center. There will be.
Well, yeah. If my memory is correct, you were elected in '76, is that right?
74, took office in 75.
Okay.
74.
And then was it 76 then when the optional 1% was first
allowed? Yeah,
first, and then we've passed it every year since then. The only county who has renewed it every single time. But how big of a difference has that made for Campbell County and Gillette to have that for the last 40 years?
Absolutely essential. We couldn't have survived those early years without it. And a lot of the things that we have now that we appreciate came because of that. I even helped protect that when I was back in Washington with the Marketplace Fairness Bill, which is where people selling on the internet have to collect the tax for municipalities and states. And I worked on that bill for a number of years. It wasn't, and passed it through the Senate. I didn't get it completely passed, but the Supreme Court based their decision on the fact that the Senate did pass it. And a lot of the text comes from the bill that I had. So during COVID, towns have done pretty well. And it's because people haven't been able to go anywhere to shop and pay their tax money someplace else.
That's right. Well, and there's been more of I think, a consciousness, a focus to say, well, yeah, let's do it here. And
keep the local businesses going. Yeah.
So speaking of,
if they ordered online, the tax still came here.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. I mean, the profit, but the tax came here.
Yeah.
So you talked about bills, And one bill I wanted to ask you about was talk about how difficult was it to get us the AML stuff back? And how important has that been for the state to get that money for what it was intended to be?
It was absolutely essential, and we weren't getting it. And that's one of the first things I checked on when I got back there, because I said, this money's been flowing into a trust fund. Every ton of coal in Wyoming has a tax, and half of the tax goes back east, and half of it's supposed to go to Wyoming. And we haven't been getting our money. The others haven't been getting their money either. And they said, well, you'll have to find some way to put some money in there. I said, no, the companies have been putting money in there. They said, oh no, that's not how it works here. That money's already been spent. I said, I never heard of a trust fund that worked that way. Well, as it turns out, all of the trust funds work that way. Social Security works that way. Medicare, Medicaid, Highway Trust Fund, Harbor Maintenance, all of those.
It's like, why collect the money for those purposes if you're not using it for those purposes?
Yeah.
It almost sounds like is that the model that got Black Jewel in trouble?
I don't know, but that's the model that's gotten the federal government in trouble. They just slip bonds in the drawer and go ahead and spend the money, and so technically it's there. There's a bond in the drawer. There's just no cash to back up the bond. So I put some pressure on and was able to get that released. Incidentally, that was with the help of Senator Kennedy.
Oh, really?
I got to work on a major pension bill that has kept people who were promised pensions by corporations so that they got their money, and so that the corporation wasn't put out of business. And it was a difficult accounting process to make sure that it was honest. And then after we passed it in the Senate, we had to conference it with the House because they had a different idea. There were 4 committees involved in the thing, which makes negotiations even more difficult. And I got to be the conference chair for that. I was over all 4 of these committees and tried to pull everything together so that we wound up with a final bill that would actually work. And we did. And as we were finishing it up, just side story here.
That's fine.
Every place I went, I was followed by the media. I mean, they had people spotting so that if I ducked out a different door, they could call from that door, and pretty quick all the cameras would be down there, wanted to know what was going on in the conference committee. They never did get the fact that I never negotiate through the media because you can get locked into something if you say this is what we've agreed on and you really haven't agreed on it. So I wasn't a font of information, but I never was followed like that before or since. And I came out of one room and here's all these cameras. They said, what did you decide in there? I said, I didn't decide anything. That's the bathroom. So it was just crazy. But we finally got an agreement. And as I got the agreement, the 2 leaders from the Senate came in and said, okay, here are a few more bills we're going to put on that bill. I said, oh, no. In Wyoming, you're only allowed to address what's on the topic. And that's always what I do. They said, well, that's not what we do here. So you'll put these extra bills on the pension bill because it has to pass, and so they will pass too. I said, well, wait a minute. I've been trying to get money from abandoned mine land ever since I got here, and I've been told that it can't be done. So if you're gonna put your bills on there, I'm gonna put my bill on there. They said, no, that's not how it works. And Senator Kennedy said, no, Mike, you are the chairman. You can do what you want.
So you put it on there.
I put it on there, and it passed along with the other stuff that they put on there. And that's how we started getting the abandoned mine land money. Now we've had to defend it every single year because that's a big pot of money. And
everybody wants it.
Everybody wants it. They stole it once for highways. Our delegation was able to get it back. and get repaid for it even. But it's always one that they're looking at. Of course, they'll be looking at it less and less now that they think that coal is disappearing. It won't disappear. It can't disappear. The nation can't get along without it, and we will be coming up with alternate uses for coal. In fact, a former staffer of mine is working on a project that will take rare earth out of coal, and the coal can still be burned afterwards. But there's also another group that has figured out that there's
out of coal or out of the
out of the coal.
Okay.
Yeah, the coal.
Because I've heard about the clays above and below the coal.
No, there's rare earth in the coal itself. And there's another group that knows that it's even a little more refined once it's been burned. So you can get rare earth out of the ash. So the fly ash will become valuable. And of course, we probably have a lot of it here, but we've got the source of the coal here too.
Sure.
And so one of the things I've had to do was stop the federal government from doing a Chinese rare earth plant in Texas. Right now, the only refinery for rare earth are in China.
Yeah.
And from a national security standpoint, that's not a good idea.
No, we did something a while back on that, and that's been something that that the president has been very, very vocal about. Is that we need to develop our own rare earths, and
absolutely.
How does Wyoming fit into that?
Oh, we do. We have the biggest supply anywhere of just rare earth. Of course, it still has to be refined, and the reason that process slowed down was because they recognized that they didn't want to ship it to China to have it refined. And so they've been working on some refining techniques too, and the possibility of doing that. So that's been an interesting hobby for me. One nice thing about the Senate, you can be involved in anything, even if it doesn't come under your committee.
Oh. And as far as energy goes, Wyoming with coal and oil,
and natural gas,
and natural gas, and now
and uranium,
How important is it now that Wyoming be leading the way with the carbon sequestration and capture and reuse, all of that type of research, which really is picking up more attention on a national and global level?
Well, they see putting coal out of business as the solution to climate change, and I think that probably people driving automobiles or wearing clothes or doing any number of other things that require electricity are equal culprits. But
there's a lot, and as if all our vehicles are going to be electric, electricity's got to be produced somewhere, right?
Well, California's had rolling blackouts. I don't know if you noticed that
But they also have the moratorium on how much of their energy can come from coal.
None.
Yes. So when they run out of energy, they can't use anything that comes from coal. So I guess I don't know.
Have you ever seen the guy on the pole separating the electrons?
That's detailed work.
They're getting the same electrons that everybody else is getting. Now, they're not getting enough of them because of their requirement. They shut down the natural gas and they shut down the coal in California.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
you might have noticed that during the rolling blackouts, they said that it would be okay if natural gas opened up again and they wouldn't be imposing the restrictions on them.
In California?
In California, yeah. It just kind of slid right by. I think if you check, you'll find that they've allowed some coal-fired power plants to come back online in California too. Wow. I've heard rumors. I haven't had to check.
It's been quiet then, because I haven't heard about that.
Oh, they'll keep it really quiet. They didn't believe in it, but they do believe in electricity.
Mm-hmm. So, what do you think? I mean, and you're in an interesting position. Is you're going out, so you don't have to, or you're not charged with dealing with it. But the president-elect's new his repeatedly stated war on fossil fuels, for a better word, to pretty pretty steep there, especially around here. That's something everybody has paid attention to.
Well, there have been wars on fossil fuels before. In the 70s, somebody from the federal government made a bad comment about Saudi Arabia, and they cut us off. And we had gas lines. And at that time, we promised that we would become self-sufficient on energy. And we eventually did, but it was a painful time. People bought filling stations to get the gas that was in the tanks underground at that filling station. So to say that we're going to get rid of fossil fuels, there's a lot of inventing that has to be done in the meantime. And there's not a lot of emphasis on that. There's only an emphasis on taxing. And taxes might stimulate it, but a prize works better. And that's one of the nice things about what's happening north of town here. There's a prize for coming up with some better uses of coal-fired power plants, or better ways to take CO2 out. You know?
Yeah, and it's important that happens, though, right? Because I mean, at the rate that coal-fired generation is coming off the grid and being retired, and they're moving it up. But is there any concern that by the time they find economical viable solutions to do this, that there aren't anybody left? Or if they do, are you confident that they'll start building coal plants again, or converting to coal, because now they can use that CO2 as a commodity?
Yeah. Well, here's some more of that story that I was telling about Saudi Arabia. They had so much of the oil market that they could influence the price on a daily basis by the comments that they made. And so the oil drilling that was happening in Wyoming was actually kind of put out of business by them saying they were going to increase their supply dramatically. And that brought the price down to where you couldn't make money on the wells that we were drilling here.
Yeah.
It got it down to $8 a barrel. And so everything in the oil business kind of went out of business. And one of the difficulties, then it didn't take very long, and Saudi Arabia said, well, we're going to cut back our supply. And they didn't really do it. They never increased it. They never decreased it. They just put out the rumors about what they were going to do. And when they said that they were going to decrease the supply, the numbers shot up again. Well, what they had done was put the oil companies the drilling companies out of business in Wyoming and the rest of the nation. And when it comes back, you got to find trained people again. It's not that easy to get started up again. Sure. Not to mention all the bankruptcies and everything that happened with it. So rumors can have a huge effect too. And
definitely
some of what we'll hear generated out of Washington will be rumors, because they won't be able to back them up in the time frame that they're talking about.
Oh, definitely. Well, any let's see. Sorry, I'm taking notes on where things are. Oh. So, in your years at the Senate, is there any particular, aside from the AML bill, any particular piece of legislation that stands out that you're particularly proud of, or glad that got or took a huge amount of work but finally came through?
Actually, every one of them. It's a major achievement to get a bill through Congress, and I got a lot of them through. One of my first ones was a Campbell County bill. I happened to, we came back every weekend and traveled a different part of the state. So every other month we'd get to Gillette. Well, one of the trips that we were in Gillette, and that meant we were working Northeast Wyoming, not just Gillette.
Sure.
But I was here and I heard that the governor was going to be doing a town hall meeting at the library. And And so I thought, out of courtesy, I probably ought to go to it. I'm a new guy, I don't know about these things. So I went to it, and I didn't know that a couple days earlier, the federal government had said that gas in the coal belongs to the coal, and therefore it's a solid, and therefore people who have leases and are receiving royalties on coal bed methane can't get it and will have to pay it back. The place was packed. And of course, the question they wanted to ask the governor is, what are you going to do about this federal government saying that that's a solid and it's part of the coal and we're out of luck? And the governor was very clever. It was Governor Geringer. He said, well, let's see, that would be a federal problem. Senator Enzi, what are you going to do about it?
And you said?
I'm new. I mean, I didn't say that. I said, I guess I'll turn in a bill. And somebody in the audience was astute enough that they said, let's see, you're a freshman, the term is about ended for this year, so you have about 30 days to work on it. How are you gonna get that done? I said, I don't have any idea, but I know that if I don't put the bill in, it will not pass.
Right.
I went to Washington, I put the bill in, I lobbied it on one-on-one. I called on some of my state legislative groups that I had gotten to know over my years in the state legislature to help me lobby their state senators and House people. And in 30 days, that passed both houses unamended, with the coal companies and the tribes fighting
it. Wow.
Yeah. But one of the real thrills was that only took care of you can only pass legislation going forward. You can't make it retroactive. Well, that still affected a lot of people. So there was a court case that went through on the thing, and it was a lot of fun hearing the Supreme Court say, when they're hearing this case, so how would that work under the Enzi bill? And they ruled in favor of the landowners. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. That could have been a definite game changer for a lot.
Oh, there were a lot of people that were receiving a lot of money, and paying that money back would have been probably impossible, but just the thought to our economy of not having that money coming in, just tragic. And what business was it the federal government anyway, except they owned all the coal, because coal they knew was going to be valuable. As soon as it was, they made coal federal.
That's right.
Now, there were some people that homesteaded before that time that had private coal, but most of it was federal. So they were then reaching into the natural gas field at the same time. But I've had a lot of bills that have been kind of fun to work on that I never anticipated doing. President Bush shocked us when he said that we were going to spend $15 billion on the AIDS epidemic. And 15 billion at that time was a lot of money. So it got a lot of attention, and there were groups meeting all over the place figuring out how they could tap into that money. And I went to those meetings as the accountant and as the budget person. I'm fascinated by this. How are we? And after going to several of them, I went to one of them, and I went to the leader, and I said, you really ought to come up with a plan. All these tinkering around the edges, don't do that. You ought to get the White House, the House, and the Senate together, figured out, and do a bill. And he said, well, that's a great idea. I said, would it be okay if I came to that meeting? He said, well, yeah, it's your idea, you can come. So, not knowing much about AIDS, I stayed up all night reading about it, writing up questions that I had, things that I wanted to know. And so I went to the meeting the next day, and the leader started out by saying, today we are going to come up with a plan. We're going to stay here till we've got a plan. So Enzi, take it away. So I got to lead the discussion for a couple of hours, and we did come up with a plan. And the leader at that point said, so I think we got it figured out now. Enzi, go ahead and draft that up give it to Foreign Relations. I did, and Foreign Relations worked it over, and that's the days when we used to do a lot of work in committees. And the committee came up with a final plan on it, and that passed the Senate and the House unanimously unamended.
Wow.
And then they sent me to Africa to see what the problem was.
With you leaving the Senate, I haven't looked, maybe there's one other now. Does that leave the Senate without an accountant?
There's one there, yeah.
There's one there now.
Yeah.
Okay.
For 14 years, I was the only one, and then we got another one, and now I'm leaving, and we'll be back to one. And he does a superb job, but nobody listens to accountants, you know.
Why do you think that is? You're dealing with these huge amounts of money. How come nobody listens to the accountant?
We're too depressing.
You tell them the truth, right?
We're always telling them you can't buy people's votes with their own money.
So now, officially, you're done. You don't have any more votes to put in. Nothing.
They're still voting. I left. I told them how they could work through this dilemma. Technically, we're supposed to pass the appropriations by October 1st. The way we used to do it was we passed, there are 12 bills. We passed them one at a time. Now, there were always a few that actually had a real hang-up, and we maybe had to extend that particular agency's funding. Now, it's all put in an omnibus. One bill, all the money. Well, it's really not all the money. One of the tricks in Washington is to get your pet project put into mandatory. Mandatory means we're gonna pay for it whether we got money or not. Now, in order to get it that way, a lot of times you have to say, I'm gonna move this to mandatory, and this is the revenue source that will cover it, even though maybe it won't cover it in perpetuity.
The same revenue source that was covering all of our AML non-payments.
We're up to 70% now that never gets a vote. So we're only voting on 30% of the money. And we can't get that done because we try to group it all together. I've said all along that comprehensive is a really bad way to legislate. You need to do it step by step. And if you take each piece, and they can be really substantial pieces. I mean, we're talking big problems. They can be substantial pieces, and you work that, there's a better chance that you're gonna get it right. But if you got people throwing in their ideas and saying, I'll vote for it if you put my piece in there, but we're not gonna debate that one separately or even cover it well in committee. You just gotta take that or you don't get my vote. That's a terrible way to legislate. But that's what we're seeing. Everything is comprehensive. And that means that it's so big that it's incomprehensible. It means that nobody can really dig into any part of it and do amendments or eliminate parts of it. And eventually people panic, and that's where we are now. You always notice it as it gets closer to Christmas, we run into this dilemma. I would vote against anything that they're doing right now, because what they're doing is adding Christmas tree stuff, trying to pick up enough votes to get it to pass. And the closer they get to Christmas, the more likely people are to accept that.
Definitely, and there always seems to be this looming, well, we can't have a shutdown.
Well, a shutdown is really expensive. And contractors have gotten are so knowledgeable on it now that the threat of a shutdown costs us money. They put some stuff in there of stuff they have to start shutting in before the shutdown happens. It has a cost to it, so they can include that in their contract. So yeah, shutdowns, and I've tried several different proposals that would eliminate shutdowns, but it doesn't work with the philosophy of spending money.
Anything out there that you really hoped would get done before you had to leave, but that just didn't seem like it's gonna happen? And I don't want to call it a regret, but what's the one thing that you really wished you could have seen happen?
budget reform. That was a bipartisan budget reform. And I was stopped by Senator Schumer. Said, no, we're not going to do that because we might be in control after the next election, and we don't want to be subject to that. It would have virtually forced the budget to be bipartisan. It hasn't been for years, but I did put through a budget reform package that's the first budget reform package to be bipartisan since 1990. But that's the one that got stopped because it could be too tough for the majority party to be able to do what they want to do. Actually, I think that it wasn't that good of a bill that there wouldn't have been some workarounds on it. You never get it perfect the first time. In fact, you never get a perfect piece of legislation. And that's one reason why people, if they have something they'd like to have in a piece of legislation, but it's been fought on for years, if they'll just hold off on it, they might be able to get it later. If they insist on it being in the bill, it will probably kill the bill. And that's why a lot of things in Washington don't get done in 10, 12 years.
Kind of an all or nothing approach.
Yeah.
Now that are you officially retired? Or are you officially just not a senator anymore? How do you view it?
January 3rd, which is a Sunday, which is constitutional, is when Cynthia Lummis will be sworn in to take my place in the U.S. Senate. And so the day after that, in every way, I am officially retired.
Okay, no gray area there.
No, my Senate ID is canceled.
So
but I have all of my offices already had to shut down. So if anybody has casework, they've got to go to Senator Barrasso or to Lummis, but you won't be able to actually work on them or get anything signed.
Sure, until she gets in.
Or Representative Cheney.
So
we worked as a team, so.
And you've worked with Lummis before when she was in Congress. What advice do you have for her about going to the other side?
I've shared a lot of things with her. I don't ever try to tell anybody how to do anything, but there's some things I learned that I think were helpful. I mean, some of them are really little that I help on. One of them is there's a microphone at each desk on the floor, and it's got a cord on it that you can pull out, and you can get it to kind of lock in place so you can put it on your lapel and speak. And new people, and this happened to me for a couple of years, when you finish speaking, you take that cord and you pull it different directions, trying to get it to zap up, and eventually it does. But it's an interesting dance. So what I always tell each of the new senators, I take them to one of the microphones and I show it to them and I say, how are you gonna get this cord to go back? And after they try it a couple of times, I say, just set it in the slot. You set it in the slot and magically goes and wraps up.
Hey, little things that you just don't know until you've actually been there. Anything about the office? Is there like a hidden door or something in there if she wants to get away from somebody? Or?
Well, she doesn't know what office she'll have yet.
Oh, okay, so she just doesn't get yours.
The offices are, no, she doesn't get to use mine either. She has a temporary office.
Okay.
But I've got to say that temporary office is nicer than probably what she had as a house member. And then she'll get to select from a suite of offices, although they're given out on the basis of population, so Wyoming gets less office space than other states.
Now, I asked Senator Barrasso this, I don't know, a year and a half ago or so when he came through. So I guess I ask you too, who's the funniest guy in the Senate? Who's just the funniest guy? Is there someone who's like, does he play practical jokes? Behind the scenes, is it all serious, or do you guys ever have a little bit of fun in there?
Well, usually just at the time we're having our last meal before we leave town is usually a lot of fun. People are a lot more relaxed then. And John Kennedy probably has the most interesting way of phrasing things. He's from New Orleans, And he has that kind of, shuffle your toe a little bit while you talk thing like Senator Simpson had.
Yeah.
And comes up with some unique phrasing. And I always enjoy that. I'm pretty sure it's kind of spur of the moment. But I'm sure that a lot of people suspect that he really worked on it a long time. No, he just has a wit that makes the point well with different wording than you've heard before, which is very clever.
Sure,
Now,
non-cliche.
as far as being able to tell jokes, Pat Roberts is probably the best at that.
Pat Roberts, huh?
Yeah, who also just retired.
And how has social media changed being a public official? Because there wasn't Twitter or Facebook or anything when you started, but now it's like every little thing anybody does, they cough coming out of the restroom, it's out there. You can't. There's nothing at no time that isn't potentially public fodder. How is that different? I don't, to tell you the truth, I don't remember seeing you do a lot of tweeting or anything anyway.
Nope. My staff, I've been writing up some of my 80% rule and asked them to take a look at it, and they said, we're used to only editing single page releases. I said, well, you might add to that the releases should only be for earned media, not just for the sake of a release. You need
Totally.
to do something. And they said, well, you don't talk very long about what you did. I said, well, my dad always said, if you're still bragging about what you did yesterday, you haven't done much today. So I've always got a lot of things in the works. You mentioned, things that I want to get done. I've had them promise several things that they'd go ahead and put in the bill if I just vote for it. I said, no, that's not how I work it. Those ought to be in the bill anyway, but I don't sell my vote. In Wyoming, it's a felony if you trade a vote, and both sides are supposed to report it. So, no, you should put them in there, but that's not going to guarantee a vote from me.
Oh, definitely. So no, that you have it.
So I've got several that may wind up in these things. I have no idea, but they won't be because I promised that I'd vote for it, because I told them that these are runaway bills. I probably would not vote for them anyway.
How was the experience giving your last your last address on the Senate floor? There, we watched it here.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty intimidating, actually, because as you're doing it, you realize that may be one of your last speeches ever on the Senate floor. And Lamar Alexander did his speech in the morning, and he is a phenomenal speaker. And as far as humor, you ought to list him as humorous. He always said that, who was it that told him? I can't remember. But, Alex Haley told him, if you want to make a point, tell a story. And so most of his speeches start off with, I want to tell you a story. And that does work. And he has some interesting stories over his time of being governor. He actually got to be governor a little bit early because they kind of rode the other guy out of town on a rail, I think. He was doing some bad stuff, and so he got to start early, and then he went to Australia after he was done being governor, so he wouldn't be interfering with governor politics or stuff in Tennessee. And he wrote a book while he was there, and he's been the president of I think the University of Tennessee. I think that's right. He's been a college president, and he's been the Secretary of Education before, and I'm sure he was a fantastic attorney. So he's got lots of stories that he can tell, that he knows how to make them into a point. And Usually
And you had to follow that.
Yeah, I had to follow that. Yeah. So I started out by saying, and now you get to hear from the accountant.
I've done the spreadsheet on my time here.
Yeah, right. One of the funniest things that happened during the speech is I had to throw in the thing again that I had been asking to have computers on the floor.
Yes.
That has to go through the Rules Committee, and 2 spaces to my right is the chairman of the Rules Committee, Roy Blunt. And while I'm speaking, his phone goes off. So I don't know whether that's gonna get done or not, but it would really help people. People would see more people sitting on the floor of the Senate listening to speeches because they'd be able to do something while they listen. Now, a lot of them are in their office listening, but they're doing something. You know, they're answering letters or writing a speech or whatever. But we know what's going on the floor. But we'd be on the floor, and that would impress spectators a lot more.
Well, definitely.
It looked like we're really, really interested in what's going on. Yeah.
Oh yeah. When I covered the Boulder Valley School District, I'd take the laptop and
Yeah.
I'd be taking notes. I had the agenda. I knew what I was interested in. By the time, and it probably looked like I was really interested in taking notes on everything they said. By the time they were done, I had like 2 or 3 other stories already written.
Yeah. Yeah.
Along with whatever they were,
Sure.
they were talking about. So it's actually it's a productive thing too.
Yeah. Send notes to your staff on things you want to get done, and you have them clarify things that you're hearing on the floor, or you can actually look up and see whether what they said was right or not.
That's right.
And build a counter argument. Then there might even be actual debate on the floor instead of just speeches. Yeah.
Yeah.
It could be really exciting.
It could be.
And
Now, was there any reason why now? Why not another 6 years? Why was now the time to? Why not go in like an even 30 years there?
I never intended to die in office.
Well, I sure hope you have more than
And
6 years
I've
left.
always had a lot of things that I want to get done. I still have a lot of things I want to get done. But the capability to do them is changing, and a different person may be able to do those things that I haven't gotten done, that could be done. So it was time to leave. Now, each of the times that I've run before, though, I never anticipated running for senator. When Senator Simpson said he was retiring, I was with my family. They said, "Is that something you'd ever consider?" I said, "Oh no, there'll be a lot of people with a lot more experience that I've got. I will back one of them for Senate." And I had a lot of people that encouraged me to run for it. And no, same thing. And after the legislative session was over, I had some counties that were calling me, municipalities that were calling me, because I did a lot with municipalities after I was mayor of Gillette.
Mm-hmm.
While I was mayor of Gillette, I was the president of the Wyoming Association of Municipalities and worked with the counties. And but I kept saying no. And then we were in church, and we were singing the last song, and I'm not concentrating on the last song a lot, although the title was kind of interesting. But I'm saying, because it was about leaving your boat on the shore. I'm thinking, yeah, I have missed out on a lot of fishing and hunting. It's time I got to do more fishing and hunting. And I'd had open heart surgery just a few months before. And
I remember reading about that.
Yeah. And I got this little nudge that said, "I didn't keep you alive to hunt and fish." And so I took my family home, and we said, I guess I'm supposed to run.
Now maybe you have some hunting fishing.
We were too late to get in a race. The Republican convention was only a month away, but we, as a family, put together a race, and they had a straw poll, and the winner of the straw poll at the state almost had always won the election. And Barbara Cuban loaned me a consultant, her consultant. I didn't even know you needed a consultant. And my family and I met with him, and so he was outlining some of the things that we really ought to do. And I asked him about this straw poll, and he said, oh, you got into the race so late, if you can come in second or third, you're gonna be okay. Okay, so everybody leaves except my son. And my son comes over to me and he says, are we in this to be second or third? I said, oh, no, we'd like to win. He says, okay, I'm still with you. And we wound up winning the straw poll. And once again, it worked out that the winner of the straw poll won the primary. And that's the last time they had a straw poll. 6 years ago, when I was thinking about running, like I said, we come back to Wyoming every weekend. We go to different communities all the time, travel maybe 500 miles on a weekend. On Sunday, we go to church. There aren't every church in every town, so we go to some church. And 3 weeks in a row, the sermon was the same. 3 different denominations. And the message was, the word retirement is not in the Bible. So I said, I guess I'm running.
Didn't get that
this time. No messages.
Well, yeah. Any thoughts or hankering to come full circle and maybe get more involved in county and city politics, or are you, like you said, leave it to the young folks to let them?
Yeah, let's get the young people involved. And when I finished being mayor, I didn't try to continue to run the city. When I was done in the legislature, I didn't try to tell the legislators what to do, not even on federal issues. People that are on the city, people don't know how hard people have to work when they're on the city council or when they're mayor. They get advice every day from people because they're right there. They live with them. And when you're in the state legislature, it's kind of the same way. But you definitely have a feeling for your job and the people that you come in contact with. It's better than any poll that anybody can run. And so from Washington, I'm not going to try and tell them what their job is. I never appreciated anybody in Washington telling me what my job was. Now, if I needed information, I was happy if they were willing to share with me. And I didn't mind calling and asking. But I've never considered it to be my role to second guess or to try and tell people how to do their job. They got elected. It wasn't my election, it was their election. They have to get to know the people, know the problems, come up with the solutions, and hopefully do it all civilly. One of the things I see kind of disappearing is civility. I don't think anybody ever gains from that. They can get publicity from it. I'll come out of a meeting in Washington and a reporter will come running up to me and say, you know, this person said this about this person. What do you think? I said, oh, I never comment on anybody else. I just did something in this meeting in here that you really ought to be interested in. That committee just did something, made a difference. Oh, not my assignment, gone.
Well,
that's one of the things that's affecting Washington. They're not reporting on what gets done.
And what do you think about how just the state of how the United States is now? And it seemed, I was thinking back to, remember back in, I think it was in '79 when Jimmy Carter gave that famous crisis of what was it, conscience or confidence speech, where he says, you know, we're having a crisis of, you know, confidence, and people think it's going to be worse, and it's not going to, you know, worse. The more people now think it's going to be worse in the next 5 years than it was in the. What do you think about what's happening today, and of course with COVID, and it's just people are roiled up about stuff. They're passionate about their views, and there isn't a lot of the 80-20 going on, it seems.
Well, today we're more informed of the crisis of the moment.
That's true.
But the crisis of the moment really isn't the big effect. And the crisis of the moment